Peter, I am so excited to have you here because I love physics. Ever since I discovered Big Bang Theory, I thought, great, I need to speak to a physicist, and here you are. So, Peter, tell me, did you always want to be a physicist? Was that the plan?
I probably always wanted to understand the world is probably the best answer to that. I got myself into physics when I went to uni. I chose to take a year abroad when I went to university, and I ended up in a physics lab in Freiburg and Breisgau in the middle of the Black Forest. And they happened to have a partnership with CERN underneath the Swiss Alps. And somehow I ended up on a research project to do with superconductivity. And superconductivity is what happens when atoms go down to almost absolute zero, that's minus 273 degrees Celsius, and they start to behave in different ways. The electrons start to float about and they don't stick together in the old ways. And this is how you get super effects, like, for example, the magnetic trains in Tokyo, which float above the tracks, and so they have no friction, and so they can go much faster. And so I was in this amazing world of understanding how these things happen, and then kind of scaling it up to understand how things in the real world, the big world, happen too. And it was fascinating. But then somehow I kind of didn't get the satisfaction out of it, because it was basically going down 300 meters underground each day, putting some liquid nitrogen into a test tube, and then watching for a week what happened. And normally the same thing happened every single time. And the creative side of my brain couldn't cope with that. And so I escaped the Swiss mountains, and I joined an airline. I joined British Airways at the time. And within 3 years, I was managing the Concorde brand. And I kind of made the big shift from the left brain to the right brain, if you want to call it that. And years later, when I wrote my first book, I wrote it all about left brain and right brain, and not how one is better than the other, but how you need both, and how both can help each other. Or in today's world, how analysis can help creativity and creativity can help analysis. Or as the book said, how you can be Einstein and Picasso in today's world, or perhaps you need to be.
Wow, fantastic. I can't believe you've been from underground to as high, probably as high as you possibly go without going into space with Concorde. Wow, what a fantastic change. Brilliant. I missed Concorde, sadly, never got a chance to go on that. So very jealous of that. You've made me jealous. And Einstein and Picasso, and I'm delighted that you need both sides of the brain. I was a bit worried there. I didn't know where you were going to go. So you went from physics, you went to Concorde, you went to BA, you went into business, and business is where you've sort of stayed. You love business. Has your physics background helped you with the business side?
Not directly, but indirectly, yes. And I think, the real point of the book was that when I started in business, people knew I had a scientific background. I was trying to keep it a secret, but they kind of found out. So they always said, you can do the spreadsheets, or you can do the analysis. And I hated that, because I'm a people person, and I love ideas, and I love creativity. And the real point is that if you can do the analysis, you can focus your creativity in the places which really matters. You can find out where the growth is. You can find out what customers really want. And then you can focus your creativity on that. And likewise, you can focus, when you've got a creative idea, you can improve it, or you can make it better by being analytical. So I think you use it almost without realizing it. And we shouldn't be afraid of these more kind of logical, analytical things in business, because they really help us to focus our minds and be even more creative than what we thought we could be.
I know you love creativity, you love innovation, and in fact, it's one of the areas you really look into. And you've looked at some of the most innovative companies and what sets them apart and what they do. Do they have that sort of the left brain, right brain themselves as part of their business structure, would you say?
Of course they do. And if you look at every kind of exciting, transformative, disruptive company right now, there's a leap of faith. There's a hypothesis which they're making. They're stepping forwards, just like Albert Einstein did. He leapt forward and he created a hypothesis. In his case, it was energy and matter are connected in some way, and he found the c² with the help of a mathematician who happened to be his wife. But really, these companies who are disrupting and transforming markets, they're taking a leap forward. And you need a hypothesis. You need to imagine something which doesn't exist today in order to achieve that. And I think that's the big thing, which is actually a scientific process. It sounds kind of very kind of creative, but science is actually creative. You can't kind of move forwards without making that leap of faith and then testing it and proving it. So I think that's the biggest way we really see, the science of the disruptor in today's world.
Fantastic. So you've got to imagine. So you use your imagination a lot and you hypothesize. I like that. Are there any businesses that are really shaping markets that you've seen out there that you can give us as examples?
Wow.
Big question. I'm sorry, big question.
Where do I start? Well, the most recent book I wrote, Business Recoded, it's all about looking for companies who are recoding businesses and particularly recoding their markets and how their markets work. And I looked for 50 companies. I searched across the world. I was particularly interested in talking about the leaders of those companies to find out what it is which they really did differently. What is the thing which they're doing to shake up their particular worlds? And so I'm not particularly interested in the biggest or the most profitable companies necessarily, but I'm really interested in the shaker-uppers. So who are they? Well, I think there's some real transformer companies, and I went to China and found Ping An, for example. Now, Ping An used to be China's, or used to be one of the world's largest insurance companies. One of the things which they did about 3 years ago was to say, well, we can do insurance, but we could do a lot more. We've got this fantastic platform which has got incredible amount of data and has almost 1 billion customers. What else could we do with it? And they started to map out different areas which they could move into, not just financial services, but they saw one of the biggest opportunities in healthcare. And over the last 3 years, Jessica Tan and her team has created the world's leading online platform for healthcare. With almost 1 billion users, it's entirely digital in terms of its interface. You use artificial intelligence to connect with the customer to see if they actually have a problem. If they do have a problem, they can then use their smartphone to talk to experts in a call center. So you can bring all of the medical experts together so you don't have to go off and search for them. And then if you do need, say, medicine, then they will deliver it by a motorbike courier, which is pretty common in China, or by vending machines in all of the major cities and towns. And then they have a partnership of physical clinics and hospitals too. So it's a truly digital first, but also physical business model, which really brings together, in a sense, the future of healthcare. So that's one example, but you could look at many others. Older businesses like GM, for example, and how Mary Barra is truly shaking up GM out of bankruptcy and really kind of starting to lead the driverless car revolution. Or you could look at real disruptors, and they, obviously we know about Tesla and so on, but I think some of the really interesting disruptors are the super apps, as they call them. These are the apps which bring together all sorts of different services for the consumer. And they started with WeChat in China, but Grab in Singapore, or Jio in India, or Rappi in South America. These are examples of companies who are truly, truly customer-centric, and they understand the customer better than anybody, and they can bring any service to that customer. And so I think they are not just disrupting one market, but they're disrupting multiple markets and fundamentally changing the way the customer sees the world and what they need and who they trust and who they work with.
Wowzers, super apps, gosh, and incredible, these changes. So what strikes me from what you're saying is this real attention to the customer. It's about really being customer centric, which I know is something you're very passionate about. Talk to me a bit more about the importance of listening to your customers and why that is the future for companies and success, and why we're not doing it as much as we should be.
Well, I think it's fundamental because the world is changing so fast. And we used to live in this world where we assumed everything was pretty steady state. We kind of looked at last year and we added 10% to it. And if you look at many of the older most successful companies in the world, they kept kind of stretched their old success. They looked at what got them to be successful 10 years ago, and they keep trying to repeat it, and they keep trying to optimize it a bit further, usually just by cutting costs and being more efficient, because you can't go any further from an innovation point of view. So how do you look at the future when it's not steady state and when it's constantly changing? And I think, you know, the customer in many ways is your best guide to that. And I'm not just talking about saying, what do they want now? Because that's the mistake we often make when we think about being customer centric. It's not just about asking a customer, what do you want and how can we serve you better today? It's actually thinking about how can you make their lives better? How can you solve their problems? What is it which is kind of emerging in terms of their behaviors and their attitudes, which you can kind of address, or you could solve problems in a better way than they ever imagined. You know, Steve Jobs is a great example of somebody who many people said was not customer centric because he never did formal traditional market research, but he thought like a customer. Nobody said they wanted an iPhone or an iPad or many of the other products, but he imagined what they were doing and he imagined how they behaved, and he imagined with those behaviors how he could make life better for them. So I think, you know, if you think about everything in business, you should really be thinking from the outside in. You know, starting with your purpose. What is your purpose as a business? It's not to be the best manufacturer in the world. It's to solve some customer problem in a better way than anybody else. And that's a real kind of motivating passion. If you think about your brand, it's not about who you are, which matters. It's about what you enable the customer to be, which matters. And that's what your brand should be about. When you think about your proposition, which brings together your products and services, it's not about the product itself being the hero. It's about the solution being the hero. And ultimately, not even just the customer buying it, but you should be motivated by what the customer does with the product and service once they have bought it, because that's where they get their value from it. And so customer centric is this much bigger idea, which both enables us to understand where we're going in the future and looks at the signals and looks at the pathways forward, but it also gives us the motivation to do more. And it also unlocks more value, which we can then capture.
Wow, that was a masterclass. That absolutely was fantastic. If you transcribe this, get it printed. It's a book. That was just phenomenal. I love that. I'm going to re-listen to that. You touched on the fact that you have released another book. In fact, it was out in December, and it's called Business Recoded. Do we really need to recode? Is it because of the pandemic, or should we be recoding all the time? Why do we need to recode, Peter?
Well, good question. And, you know, I sat down at the beginning of the pandemic in January or February, I think it was, 2020, and really thought about what am I writing about? And I'd been trying to write a book for some time about how do you respond to the changing world of technology. But then it's also the changing world of markets. And, you know, I touched on before some of the fantastic things which are happening in Asia now. And we do really have a seismic shift in terms of our geopolitics, but also our geoeconomics, to where Asian markets are not just where the consumers of the world are, a $10 trillion market opportunity, but also many of the best ideas, some of the best emerging companies are. So I think there's the seismic shift in markets, the seismic shift in technologies. Then we've got new agendas, particularly environmental and social agendas. Social, I think, is a really underplayed one. And then we had the catalyst of the pandemic. And all of those forces together, I think we're starting to realize are requiring a different approach to business. And, you know, most people are now starting to realize that. So a code is a kind of a mantra, a way, a philosophy for doing business. I think we really need to rethink our mantras and our philosophies for doing business. Not everything is going to change. Not all the techniques are going to change, but many of the philosophies and the ways in which we approach business, in terms of what is our purpose, in terms of how do we engage with our people, how do we work with partners, and obviously how do we work with customers. All of those things are really kind of up for grabs, and I think being stirred up or shaken up pretty quickly at the moment. And, you know, one of the interesting facts about the downturn is that 57% of the Fortune 500 were created in a downturn. So downturns or moments of crises are typically the moments when you get an awful lot of shakeup within a market, many new companies emerging, and actually 90% of all patents are registered as you emerge from a downturn. So it's the time of new ideas. So you could say right now is the time when the next decade is being shaped. And so that's why I think now is the time we need to think differently about what are the codes of our business, what are the codes of competing, but also what are the codes of success.
It's really exciting. I'm excited about that. And I'm excited to hear, I didn't realize it was such a big number, that 57% of Fortune 500, that's huge if you think about it in terms of, what happens in a downturn. Wow. Maybe we should look more positively every time we have a downturn and think it's going to be, it's a new beginning, a rebirth. You mentioned social being underplayed. Tell me a bit more about that. What do you mean by that?
Well, we immediately look, when we talk about sustainability, we immediately look at environmental impacts. And that's incredibly important. And, our challenge in terms of our 2-degree challenge and so on, in terms of climate change, are incredibly important. Even from the environmental side, we're perhaps missing some of the bigger picture. So from the environmental and social side, I would say, then, we actually are living in a world where we need to create more. And we need to create 35% more food over the next decade, 40% more water, 50% more energy over the next decade, because we will have 9 billion people on the planet. And so we need to find ways of creating more with less. And then on top of that, we need to think about, how do we serve these people in a better way? Because we've seen from migration across the world to protests such as Black Lives Matter or Occupy, we've seen increasing protests at the inequality of the world. And, the pandemic has increased that inequality in the world. And I think social is one of the biggest ways which businesses can make a difference. And, I was looking at Nike versus Adidas as an example, and how they've approached their sustainability strategies over the last 10 years. And Nike have done wonderful stuff with Hannah Jones and her team since the days when they were accused of sweatshops in Asia. They've responded to that, and they've gone to the other extreme. They've been a global leader in sustainability, particularly environmental impacts. What Adidas has done has been really interesting. So they've done similarly. So they've reduced their emissions, they've reduced their impacts, they've reduced their waste. But then they've looked at how can we do more for people. And Adidas have got this purpose statement as a company as to how can they be an enabler of social mobility. So how can they really drive social change? So I was working then, for example, in the Middle East, in terms of how can we get women to take part in sport, to be more equal in society, more respected and more confident in society. And, I think it's when you particularly combine the environmental, typically reductions, but with this social positive impacts where you can do more for people, is where you get the real benefits of sustainability for a business and for a brand. And if you look at the share price of Adidas versus Nike, certainly over the last 5 years, you will see Adidas has jumped ahead about 3 times compared to how Nike have improved.
That's fascinating. And it actually goes back to what you were talking about, what do the customers want? And actually the customers of today and the future want to see businesses doing good for society, doing good for the planet, doing good for sustainability. It's really important. So it plays back into exactly what you're saying. That's really good news.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So you help leaders and companies to make sense of the future because it's incredibly complex, all these things going on. Tell me a little bit about how you help them.
Well, I think the first thing is that we can't define the future. We can't predict the future with any certainty. So perhaps one of the first things to do is to actually encourage leaders to be more curious. So to be more interested in the future. We spend an awful lot of time in business looking backwards. We look at where do we come from? What's our core competencies of the past, which made us successful in the past? What are the financial results which made us successful even last year? And it's all looking backwards, and we spend little time looking forwards. And the danger is because we can't kind of quantify it with such certainty, is we just don't even bother looking forwards. So being curious about the future is the starting point. Being interested in what is happening in your world, being interested in what is happening in adjacent worlds is really interesting. And I think lots of the signals to what's possible in your market will come from adjacent markets. So if you're a retailer, look at what's happening in entertainment, for example, or look at what's happening in sports. And they are the areas where you can see changes with the same customers, the same people, and you can see how people are responding to, what's happening in the world of gaming, or what's happening in the world of kind of sports events and all that kind of stuff. And so taking ideas from different places. Then it's about looking for the really interesting companies which can truly inspire people. And I talked about Ping An before, but if you kind of start looking around the world, look at the world's most sustainable company, Schneider from France. Look at the world's most interesting car company at the moment, which is NIO from China, more valuable than BMW, but nobody's heard of it. Look at Pinduoduo, who's fusing together retail, social media, gamification, all together into a business model, which is like a virtual walk along the mall where you play a game, you get a discount with your friends, and you can do more shopping together. It's fantastic. But once you start telling the stories like that, executives get really engaged. And at that point, what I try to do with leaders is to bring them together as a team, which is really important, because we don't just want one leader having a great vision and not the others. We want all the leaders together, building up a shared vision of what they think the future could look like and what they want the future to look like, what they want the future to look like. And one of the really kind of important things is you can shape the future the way you want it to be. And, markets are so malleable at the moment. You can kind of reinvent them. You can put new borders around them. You can put new nomenclature. You can call them different names, but they can be shaped in your vision. And if the leadership team can come together, they can get all of their best ideas together on the table rather than keeping them kind of under wraps. And then they can say, how could we truly move forwards? And if you get them to jump to the future, jump, say, to 5 years or even 10 years, and say, what do we want our world to look like in 10 years' time? And you spend perhaps a day doing that. And then you say, well, how are we going to get there? And then so you work backwards in a terms of series of horizons. So if it's 5 years, what do we have to do in the next 3 years to achieve that 5 years? And then what do we need to start doing next year in order to achieve that 5 years? Suddenly, they will stop stretching the past and doing it a little bit better than they did last year. And instead, they're working from the future backwards. And I think that's the real skill. Shape the future and the way you want it to be, and then work future back in order to get there.
I love that. That's so good. And you work, so obviously you're not going to do that in just one speech. You said you might need to do it a day with the leaders. Are you able then to stay and consult with them and help them through the process longer?
Well, I think that's what's really interesting is when you can kind of bring the skills of being a speaker, which is really to open people's minds, inspire, provoke, create curiosity and questions in them. But then you're able to kind of follow that through with more of the skills, if you like, of a consultant. And to be able to then connect that to say, so what? What can we do about it collectively? And start to capture that together, not just as a big, long flip chart, but in terms of actually kind of making sense of their ideas, bringing them together into some sort of model. What leaders really love is when they see all of their ideas, which were a long list on the flip chart, and then you can help them to turn it into some logical framework, which they can see in terms of a practical way forward. So, it might take a keynote speech, and then it might be, 1, 2, or even 3 workshops. But from that, they start to get a collective vision and a collective roadmap to where they're going in an uncertain but exciting future.
Really exciting. And I love the fact you use the phrase, so what? It's my favorite. I'm always saying to people, so what? Because that so what thing is so important.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing that you talk about, which I want to come back to, which you sort of touched on about the future, you talk about having the courage to create a better future. Does it take courage?
Of course it does. If you're going to leap into the dark, if you're going to kind of go somewhere nobody's gone before, it's not for the faint-hearted. It takes courage. It takes courage to tell a story which nobody's told before, and they don't believe it's a fairy tale, but they can believe it's going to come true. So, I think that's really, really important. And, if I look at the leaders around the world, I think that's one of the biggest things which makes them stand out in terms of the leaders who are in these shaker-up companies, the ones who are changing markets, they're transforming the markets. They have the confidence, they have the vision, but they also have the guts to actually go somewhere which their peers and their forefathers haven't gone before. So, they have to do that. And, I think, people like Jane Fraser, for example, who recently stepped up to become the CEO of Citigroup, the leading American bank, she said it's about 3 C's, which I loved, which was about curiosity, creativity, and courage. And for a big investment bank, they're one of the biggest sort of sleeping giants, or if not legacy companies around. So they really do need this courage to kind of go to places which they've never been before.
I do like that. I wrote that down. Curiosity, creativity, and courage. That's a great mantra. Love that. So listen, we could talk forever because you have such a depth of knowledge, Peter. It's wonderful. So I'm going to encourage people to go and grab your book, which is Business Recoded, and we'll put a link in the show notes so that they can read more about your fascinating research and work. I'd like to leave you're a very positive and excited person, so this is going to be easy, but I'd like to leave our listeners with a positive thought about the future, about how they can be courageous to create it. What can you leave us with, Peter?
Wow.
I do ask you big questions, don't I? But you can handle it.
Well, 2 things. Firstly, I truly believe we're in for the most exciting decade. So, we will see more change in the next 10 years than we saw in the last 250 years. And if we think about the last 250 years, steam engines, how did that revolutionize manufacturing and transportation? Telephones, how did that revolutionize the ability to do things in real time and across boundaries? The man on the moon, how did that change our dreams? And the digital revolution, how did that empower people to the point where every consumer has a mobile phone more powerful than the space shuttle? We're in for a great decade ahead of us. And as Goethe said, whatever you can do or think you can do, begin it. Because boldness has power and genius and magic in it. So be bold, brave, and brilliant in this decade ahead.
Wow, love that. Thank you. Thank you so much, Peter. That was great fun. Thank you.
Thank you.